Daniel Ellsberg is the person who released the Pentagon Papers, and in 1973, I think.
69? The book came out in 71, 72. I looked it up. I may have it wrong.
I may have the date wrong, but I thought his legal
Papers that
jeopardy
contain a history.
was in 73. He was under indictment, maybe early, and
No.
In any case, doesn't really matter.
The Times started reporting, began publishing the series of articles in 71.
71.
And they contain a history of the U.S. role in Indochina.
Right, but his legal jeopardy
68.
is what I was responding to.
Okay.
I think that's a little bit later. But anyway, the point is, Ellsberg decided to release papers that were, if you think about the way government works, right? If you have an entity, the CIA, the Pentagon, whatever, you will need to have some repository of institutional knowledge, right? And the institutional knowledge can't be, if it's an entity that isn't telling the full story to the public or isn't even telling a true story to the public, the institution has to internally understand what happened in order that it doesn't become confused later, right? And so anyway, what he got a hold of was the Pentagon's internal description of how Vietnam had proceeded, how we had ended up at war there and what it all meant. And it was explosive, right? It was absolutely devastating to the public narrative, and it revealed duplicitousness on the part of the Johnson administration. But in any case, revealing this was obviously, in retrospect at least, a protected activity, right? This was journalism, and the fact that this was very destructive to the federal government's narrative is beside the point. It was, this was a journalistically justifiable release, but it didn't mean that Ellsberg didn't end up in major jeopardy, and he did. He was threatened with, I think, the Espionage Act. And he lived in fear that he would be locked away. And in fact, in what happened this week, he talks a little bit about the jeopardy that he felt and that he thought he might live for the rest of his life behind bars, more or less as Julian Assange finds himself. But anyway, so he's a very courageous, interesting, patriotic guy. He also is an important intellectual contributor to the world, which I didn't realize until I started looking back into his history. And it turns out that even before the Pentagon Papers, he contributed basically a description of an important paradox. And the paradox is that people tend to prefer, actually it's a Rumsfeldian paradox, long before there was an important Rumsfeld, but the idea is that people tend to prefer to take risks that are known or that they think are known above risks that are unknown, even if the risks that are known are much greater than the unknown risks are likely to be, right? So that there is basically a cognitive defect where people sense that they can quantify the size of the risk will cause them to take on more risk than they need to, that the expected return might be better on the, well, here are some things we really can't say. That branch of the tree may be a better bet, but people are reluctant to do it, which is highly relevant, I believe, to much that has taken place under COVID, for example, that we may even have been played by people who understood this paradox.
Well, I've never heard this before, and so I don't know if I'm understanding correctly, but it sounds like there's the additional concern is certainty versus uncertainty, right? And I mean, that's maybe just built right into the thing, but it strikes me that it isn't inherently a paradox, because you're saying known risk, probably lower payoff, versus unknown risk, maybe higher payoff, but the devil is in the maybe, is in the odds.
No, let's take an example. And Daniel, if you're out there, and I hope you are, there's lots I'd love the opportunity to say to you, including thanks. But let's take the example of do you get an mRNA vaccine or do you face COVID? You know, back in the days when we thought that that was a choice rather than, oh, you're going to get the mRNA vaccine and then you're going to get COVID anyway, which is what we now know is the case. But
For those who choose to get the vaccine, yes.
right. So if you have the sense that, oh, well, I can quantify the risk of a bad event from the vaccines because they were studied by Pfizer in advance of the release, I have no idea what the risks of COVID are. That's a brand new thing, right? And the point is actually your risks from COVID might be much lower because if you calculate it out, well, it is a virus and we are built to handle viruses that we've never seen before. And yeah, this is a funny one, but
Well, this strikes me as a strange example, though, because the certainty, the certain side of this one, was fabricated.
oh, it's bullshit.
Right. It
Yeah.
was not. It was not only was the certainty fabricated, but the valence was opposite.
Well, that's why I'm saying that this may have been used actually to game us. That people
Yeah.
who understood that we would recoil from the unknowns of some new virus and that we would, you know, recoil into the hands of a pseudo quantified bullshit study that said that this stuff was safe and effective, right? And they may have understood that that was coming, or maybe not. Maybe they just demonstrated the principle without understanding it. I think that's plausible on the basis that they may have evolved this behavior. It may be emergent, or they may have been fully aware. I don't know. But in any case, back to Ellsberg. So Ellsberg has made intellectual contributions. He certainly made a major contribution to American history in releasing the Pentagon Papers and putting himself in very serious jeopardy over them. And then he also was targeted by Nixon's plumbers in the Watergate scandal. Remember what plumber means?
They fix leaks.
They fix leaks, exactly. And so anyway, they targeted Ellsberg. So he is an important historical figure. I will also say it is a matter of pride to me that early in our being in the public eye, he began following me on Twitter. And I always felt like, you know, to have a historically important figure like that, somebody with deep courage follow, meant something to me.